All right, so first I want to give thanks to João to leave this hot potato in my hand. I wish I had completed 77, but I'm sure he's very happy to leave it for me.
It
It
was
is
well thought.
it is perhaps one of the most
Yeah.
difficult things for us to do here. But once you get through it, the rest is very easy, very common. And item 81, increase and decrease of weight of objects. If you don't get into it, it's so unrelated to the work of mediumship itself that I'll give a quick explanation of what Kardec is saying here, and we get to self next week on chapter 5. Okay, I think item 75 is enough headache for the day, basically.
Okay.
Okay. I don't even know how to start. Yeah, let's read 77, the whole thing, and then we go back into 75 and 76. And
Okay. Okay.
okay, thanks.
77. Therefore, when an object is moved, lifted, or thrown through the air, the spirit does not take hold of it, lift it or throw it as we do with our hands. It saturates it, so to speak, with its fluid, combined with the medium's fluid. Momentarily animated thereby, the object acts like a living being, with the difference that it does not have a will of its own, but instead obeys the impulse of the spirit's will. Thus, the vital fluid impelled by the spirit endows inert objects with artificial and momentary life. Since the perispirit is nothing other than this vital fluid itself, it follows that the incarnate spirit, by means of its perispirit, is what gives life to its own body, and it stays united to it as long as its organization enables it to. When the spirit withdraws, the body dies. So if instead of a table, we took a wooden statue and acted upon it like we did upon the table, we will have a statue that would move about and produce raps in response to our questions. In other words, we would have a statue that was momentarily animated with artificial life. Besides talking tables, we would also have talking statues. How much light this explanation casts over an infinite number of phenomena heretofore inexplicable. How many allegories and mysterious effects it resolves. Okay.
Okay, so let's remind ourselves that the title of this chapter is Explanation of Physical Manifestations. Okay, and coming after all the exercise that we did before to get to this chapter, remember that Kardec was building blocks upon blocks and building for information upon information to come to this, the conclusion that physical examination happens. You already eliminate all the other possibilities. You eliminate all the foul plays and all the possible physical or mechanical causes for those things to be happening. And if you reach the conclusion that indeed there is something extra physical performing those phenomena. Okay, so the tables are tap dancing, the tables are being lifted up in the air, individuals are levitating, there has been apparitions, all the things that you can imagine in terms of physical manifestations. It's happening, and we rule out everything else. There is no foul play, there is no mechanical, there is no chemical, there is something happening that is extra physical. Okay? And of course, there are those who will see it and is still not going to believe it.
Right.
Who will see it and still will deny it. Okay? But it's important that individuals with goodwill, good intent, and provide a relative okay, average intellectual ability will question, will doubt. And when it's given enough information, they will most likely understand and accept what is happening. Okay? So if you go back to page 133, item 25, Kazakh expresses exactly that question. All those things are happening. We have cited causes for it, but people will absolutely deny and they will question, isn't that a good thing? And Kazakh says, and the answer is, it just so happened that humans are far from knowing about old laws of nature. If they knew about them, it would imply that they are highly evolved spirits. I just wanted to keep this in mind all the time during the discussion. Okay, we are very far from knowing all the laws. We're going to be talking about the law of gravity soon. Even law of gravity, you know very little about it. Gravity is one of the biggest challenges in physics. And we, in our ignorance, we think that we know law of gravity. Is when we get to the level of high studies of physics, that those guys all up there, the PhDs, say that gravity is a big problem for us to understand. Because we know so little that we can even question things that those guys are able to question. So the more that we evolve, the more we understand that you have a lot more questions than answers, that you know very little. That the laws that partially understand right now is extremely limited. We know very little yet. Okay?
Yeah.
And then on to just give playback, so to say, on topic 75 and 76. Kazakh basically is telling us that matter, any matter, organic and inorganic, in order to produce anything, in order to do something, it requires two things. It requires energy and it requires will. Okay? It requires a will to do something, and it requires an energy to do work, right? By definition, physics is work is basic expenditure of energy. If we stick right now to inorganic matter, well, inorganic matter not gonna have a will. To have a will, we have to have a means of processing thoughts. So the will has to come from some intelligent source. Will cannot come from spirits. So inorganic matter to act it needs a spirit. To be active, to produce something, it needs a spirit. Okay? And it requires also a means to which that intelligent thing, able of producing a will, of producing thought, can interact with that inorganic thing to produce a work, to do something. Okay? So while we are incarnate, right now we are three things. We are the essence, the spirit, the one who has the will, the one that produces thoughts. But in order for us to produce any work, we need instruments. So we spirit have one instrument that we call the perispirit, that is directly associated with us, the spirit. So we can pass our thoughts, our will to that perispirit. But that perispirit also are not able to associate directly with other kinds of matter. So we have a physical body. The perispirit has tremendous affinity and association with the physical body, this organic physical body that you have. And through this physical body that we can, make inorganic things to do work. So for someone who will sit by a piano and play a concerto, it will require that person to have the will, the thought, and the will and the thought passing to the perispirit. Will the perispirit will then activate, so to say, the physical body, and the physical body will do exercises, a neuromuscular system, do the exercise of sitting in front of the piano, of using the hands, of using the fingers, and make the piano do work, produce a concerto. That's very simple for us to understand, right? Is there any question there? Right? Now, when we are describing the spirit, back to the spiritual world, we are still the essence, are still the source of will, what is still the one that produces thoughts. And these thoughts to act on something else will pass through the perispirit, and the perispirit then will have to associate itself to some kind of matter that will allow this perispirit now to make an inorganic thing to act. Okay, so use the example most common of the tables, the turning tables, of the levitation of tables. Spirit, a discarnate spirit, without a physical body, will create the will, the desire to levitate to that table. Will pass that desire, that will, that thought to the perispirit. But the perispirit cannot by itself levitate to that table. It requires some kind of something else. Okay, that something else would be what we call now the ectoplasm. The spirit has affinity with the ectoplasm, just like the perispirit, has affinity with the ectoplasm, just like the perispirit has affinity with the physical body. So the perispirit can now utilize that source, that thing called the ectoplasm, coat that table, and make that table do whatever its wills, the spirit wills, being levitating, being making noise, being whatever the spirit wills, the spirit thinks or think of doing. So we understand now, we talk about primarily of inorganic things, okay? Because later on we're gonna have to talk about organic matter, then it's gonna be a little bit more complicated, okay? So the explanation of how the physical manifestation happens is exactly that. There is a intelligence that produces thought, that intelligence is able to manipulate instruments. The very first instrument is its own perispirit, and that perispirit is able to utilize ectoplasm and cover, so to say, any physical organic matter and temporarily basically animate that inorganic piece of thing, that table. And the table is now able to obey the commands of the spirit. And that's why on 77, Kardec starts with say, therefore, when an object is moved, lifted or thrown through the air, the spirit does not make hold of it. It's not, when you see a table levitating, if you ever see a table levitating, it's not that there is one spirit at each feet of that table, no, four spirits, and all for the same 1, 2, 3, now, boom, they lift up. No,
Yeah.
it's not how it happens. It's not a mechanical thing. They are able to temporarily animate that table that is now covered with a somewhat organic matter, which is the ectoplasm. Since it derives from us, since it derives from nature, is an organic matter, basically. They activated that ectoplasm, animated that ectoplasm, and now it is able to work on it. Okay. Kardec used terms over here that makes us scratch our head. It becomes very difficult for us to understand, especially when he says over here, does the vital fluid impelled by the spirit and those inner objects with artificial and momentary life? Since the perispirit is nothing other than the vital fluid itself, that makes you kind of throw the book away and say, I give up. I don't want to deal with spirit use ever again because it contradicts everything that I have learned so far, right? Kardec says the way he states over here, the perispirit is the vital fluid itself. No, no. Remember that the term ectoplasm was created by Charles Richet way after this book was published. It was the early 1900s, after his observation of other physical phenomena, and he was able to notice this whitish substance that was coating the tables and the objects that's being worked upon by the spirits. And he called that substance ectoplasm. Before that, there was no word ectoplasm. So a lot of terminologies had to be used. And that is the reason that every science must have its own nomenclature to make things easy. So when Kardec calls it vital fluid, likely he is like what now we call ectoplasm. Okay? Remember when I gave my lecture on a physical phenomena, we spoke and was on the questions that Luis placed, that André Luis talked about three things necessary very often for physical phenomena to happen. And we went through, explained all that. One, the thing that comes from the medium, which is the ectoplasm. A medium of physical phenomena is a medium of physical phenomena because it's able to donate ectoplasm for the phenomena to take place, right? And there is something that comes from nature that likely is what we call the point zero energy, right? That we learn together that for quantum physics is the energy that is in everything at all times, even at zero Kelvin, there is this energy present in everything. It's constant and it's everywhere. And likely that's the energy that's taken from nature that the spirits utilize for the physical phenomena. And there is that component that comes from the spirit itself, or the perispirit of the spirit itself. Right, those three things. That is revealed by André Luiz, and it's also discussed in Zimmerman's book. Right? Keep that in mind, because that thing will be the intelligent principle. I'm sorry, it will be the vital principle. Even I got confused words, it will be the vital principle. Okay? And I'm doing all this because the word vital fluid over here creates a lot of problems. And especially when it says perispirit is nothing other than this vital fluid itself. That's very problematic. Okay, so let's go back to the Trinity. In the Spiritism, what we call the Spiritist Trinity. You guys remember what that is, right? On top of the pyramid, what we have God, right? The creator of all things, the supreme intelligence of the universe, right? And from God creates two things. Remember that was right? The universal fluid, usually called universal cosmic fluid, but they want to use more the terminology universal fluid because universal cosmic is repetitive. And also derived directly from God, we have the intelligence principle. Right? You remember that's the Trinity, right? God, universal cosmic fluid or universal fluid, intelligent principle. From the universe fluid, the universe cosmic fluid, comes everything else that's matter, and therefore everything else that is energy. Everything that you can imagine that is not spirit comes from the universe cosmic fluid or the universal fluid. And from the intelligence principle derives us, spirits. And one other thing that derives from that is the vital principle. Okay, and I'm going to use the definition of Dacio Yolandi in his book Transdimensional Physiology, in which he defines the vital principle as being a quantum or a small fraction of the intelligent principle. So the vital principle derives directly from the intelligent principle. Okay? Is that okay? You guys understand that? Good, because I spent the whole afternoon trying to get this myself. And then you ask, is the vital principle and vital fluid the same thing? You will hear a lot of people say yes. And you even read in many books that they use it interchangeably. But they are not the same. The vital principle, as I said, is a direct derivative from the intelligent principle. When its vital principle interacts with universal cosmic fluid, the universe fluid, it produces vital fluid. So vital fluid is a modification of the universal cosmic fluid by the vital principle. And the vital fluid is what animates organic life. Organic matter is what gives life to organisms. It's what gives life to a bacteria. It's what gives life to an elephant. It's what gives life to a bird, to a protozoa. Anything that is alive, okay, it's alive because it is animated by vital fluid. Any questions there? Good. So, When Kardec tells us that does the vital fluid impelled by the spirit in those object with artificial and momentary life, it's referring to ectoplasm. Since the perispirit is nothing other than the vital fluid itself, no, it's not. The perispirit contains, I don't know what the word that I should use here, produces, contains, have, I really don't know the word that I should use here. Vital principle. There is vital principle in our perispirits. And it is vital principle when associated with the universal fluid that produces the vital fluid that allow us to be alive. So much so that when all the connectors of the perispirit and the physical body ceases, cut, that our physical body, that organic matter stops to be alive, ceases to be alive, dies. Right? So it's not that the perispirit is the vital fluid itself. The perispirit, having in itself intelligent principle, it, in association with the UCF, produces vital fluids to keep us alive. And that's why vital fluid can be replenished, can be augmented or decreased in case of diseases, in case of pests. When you give pests to someone, we can vitalize that perispirit to be more productive of vital fluids. Okay, and that's why once you separate the physical body completely, and I'm saying completely, everything, separate completely the physical body from the perispirit, that physical body cannot sustain life. Okay, does that make sense? Well, you guys are very smart because I spent the whole afternoon to come to this conclusion. It took me a long time to come to this conclusion. Because when Kardec says that the perispirit is nothing other than the vital fluid itself, it's, to me, it's a time to throw this book away and say, I'm never going to deal with this again. Or do a lot of hard work to understand it a little bit better. That is my conclusion of what I have read here in combination with, especially to Darcy. There's a lot of Darcy today, and Nani Guimarães, and put all those things together. I derived at this. Okay, anyone may have some different conclusion to it. Someone may have read something different. I'd love to hear it, because then there's a study group. We're all trying to learn this together.
Danny.
Keep in mind that Kardec presents something to us that by now we actually know more than he did at that point, because now we have all those books, we have all this literature, we have all the works of all these wonderful people that come after him to help us out.
I'm trying to
Okay,
understand
so it's
better.
no, the perispirit is not by vital fluid. Vital fluid is a modification of the universal cosmic fluid by the vital principle that vitalizes organic matter. And it's important to say organic matter because if you get a rock and load it with vital fluid, it's still going to be a rock. It's still not going to be a living object, right? It has to be organic matter.
Okay.
But if you get that same rock, coats it with the ectoplasm, which is organic, because it derives from us, derives from nature, in association with the will and the vital principle of the will of the medium, the vital principle of the perispirit, you can temporarily animate that rock. And that rock will work according to the will of the spirit. If you are incarnate, we have a physical body, don't need anything else. If you are discarnate, now you need something else. You need ectoplasm to make that association to take place. Okay?
We have a couple of questions, Elmo. Ruth, you were going to ask a question?
Any question?
Yes. What is the difference between ectoplasm and
Send
vital
it all very
fluid?
good.
Elmo, you didn't hear?
Okay, you can continue to read 78 now.
Elmo,
There is no questions.
Elmo. I don't think he's listening. Elmo. Okay.
This is not easy.
I think Elmo is not hearing.
Well, at least I think it's not that easy. So if you have questions
Okay,
later on, just shout out
he
anytime,
continues
okay?
talking. Elmo, he
78?
lost the. Let me write on the.
Not being able to hear me?
We are hearing, but you are not hearing us. Okay. So I hope he reads the chat because there is no other way.
Yeah, no, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got it?
I got it. Okay.
Okay.
So where did we stop? Where did you stop hearing me?
No, we heard you all the time. You were not hearing us.
Really? Okay. So is there any questions?
Yes, there are a couple of questions. Ruth and Danny have 5 questions. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yes, my question is, what is the difference between ectoplasm and the vital fluid? That's the part that I'm not really clear about it.
You heard Elmo? Man, we're having trouble with Elmo today.
Yeah.
He's losing us. The vital fluid, I'll try to answer Ruth while Elmo reconnects. Vital fluid is what animates life. Okay, so plants, animals, us, we are all animated by the vital fluid. Without vital fluid, there is no life.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Elmo, you heard me talking about vital fluid or no?
Yes, I did. I could hear you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, takes vital fluid is almost as a given. Okay, that it's provided for us to have life. Okay. Again, it's a modification of the universe cosmic fluid by the vital principle that vitalizes organic matter. Okay?
Okay, but what is the difference between the ectoplasm and the vital fluid?
Right. So you understand what the vital fluid is now?
Yes, and is that what it makes a medium, how do you say?
No, okay. So now let me give you what is an ectoplasm.
Okay.
An ectoplasm is a substance that likely the best hypothesis that you have right now that is produced in our Krebs cycle. Now, if you remember the Krebs cycle from biology, that when oxygen meets glucose inside of a mitochondrium, an organelle inside of the cell, it produces ATP. And ATP is the energy that sustains our physical body. Now, everything that you do, it requires energy, and the energy that we use is ATP. Just like a car needs gasoline, and the the cell phone needs battery, the physical body needs ATP, right? Once the oxygen meets glucose, there is a little explosion, so to say, inside of the mitochondrium. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is produced. But as a byproduct, other thing also is produced, and that other things is ectoplasm. That ectoplasm, there's that, call it whatever you want, a substance, is now located by the diabetic. And some individuals are able to produce in quantity, accumulate in large quantity, and are able to pour all the substance out. Usually they pour out to the natural orifices, no, the nose, the mouth, they say to the umbilicus. And that substance that now we call ectoplasm has affinity with the perispirit. So spirits in the spiritual world can use that perispirit, they can use that ectoplasm to perform physical phenomena. So there are two completely different things, the vital fluid and the ectoplasm.
Okay, and what it makes the medium ostensive medium?
Of physical phenomena, the ability to produce in large quantity and to donate ectoplasm. That we are talking about for physical manifestations. For intelligent manifestations, we're going to talk that later when we get to that topic. But there is an organic composition that allows us, one of us, to have a greater open window, so to say, to the spiritual plane. Okay, there is an organic composition, there is a perispiritual composition, there is also most likely is associated with the called a talabutica. There is kind of a screen that we have that keeps us somewhat separated from the physical and the spiritual world, somewhat separated. There is a differentiation that the talabutica of the mediums that allow that screen to be more flexible, so to say, and allow greater interaction between the two planes of existence. But that is later on.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Daniela?
So she said that her question was already answered.
Oh, okay.
We can move on. We can move on. Go ahead, Soraya.
Okay, 78. In spite of all the evidence, disbelievers object that the phenomenon of the levitation of tables without a means of support is impossible because it is contrary to the law of gravity. First, we will respond that denial in and of itself is not proof. Second, if the phenomenon is real, it is somehow contrary to all known laws, which would prove one thing: the phenomenon originates from an unknown law, and those who deny the fact cannot claim to know about all the laws of nature. We have just explained this unknown law. Nevertheless, disbelievers will not regard our explanation as sufficient, since it was provided by spirits who have shed their earthly garments instead of spirits who still wear theirs and occupy a seat at the academy. Hence, if the spirit of Arago have revealed this law while he was still alive, they would all have accepted it with the eyes shut tight. But if given by the exact same spirit after death, it would be pure nonsense. Why so? Because they believe that since Arago is dead, then everything he believed is dead forever. We have no intention of dissuading them. Nevertheless, since this objection might trouble certain persons, we will try to respond to them from their very own point of view. That is, we will momentarily set aside the artificial life explanation.
Thanks. So again, we go back to item 25 of item 74, in which Kardec states, we don't know everything yet. We know very little. And we need to be humbled to accept that if you want to learn more. Because if you come to the position that we know everything, all the laws already, then we are closing ourselves to the opportunity of learning things that are completely unknown to us. Okay? The fact that I deny the existence of something, the fact that I deny the possibility of a phenomenon to happening, does not make it to not exist, does not make this cannot happen. Okay? Go back to devout Pereira Franco, when he got tired of the same guy coming to him every day and trying to prove me that God exists, and say, okay, so now it's your turn. You prove me that God does not exist. So the fact that you deny the existence of God doesn't mean that God does not exist just because you deny it. You need to come with a counter-argument. You need to come with alternative. And that's why Kardec, again, goes building blocks to come to this point of explanation of the physical manifestation. They come to the point that they are happening. They are happening. We rule out all the other possibilities, not mechanical. Now let's see, well, explain how it happens. Now some say it cannot happen because it defies the law of gravity. Okay, indeed it does. As much as we understand, a table should not be taken off in the air and stay hanging up in the air. It does defy the law of gravity, but are there other laws that we do not know? And the fact that it's happening and there is no mechanical cause, that there is no fraud, is an evidence that there are laws that you still do not understand. Only there are mechanisms to act with gravity that allows a table to levitate. So Kardec uses their own argument to say, is exactly the point. The fact that it's happening and we have no absolute means to explain it with our understand so far, it means there are things that is way beyond our understanding that you need to be open to get to learn them. And then he concludes that perhaps even more important is that, is it really about the laws of gravity, the laws of nature, or it's really because the information come from discarnate spirits? If the same spirits who presented those informations were incarnate, enclosed in a physical body, and say the same information, that would be easily accepted. But not because it comes from discarnate spirit, is no longer accepted. So what is really the problem here is the defiance of laws of nature that we know now, was really the impossibility of a discarnate spirit to provide those informations. And Kardec again say, but yet there are people out there with a degree of intellectual ability. You must have a minimum degree of intellectual ability, well intended, that it's come with all those questions, with all those challenges, but have the good intention. It's to those that we will continue to bring our arguments to you. But there are those who are completely with their eyes closed, completely in denial, to anything that is of the spiritual nature, that Kardec says, I don't want to waste my time with those anymore. But there are those who have serious questions and who are well intended, and to those we'll continue with our arguments. Okay? Questions?
Arago was a famous scientist of the 19th century that belonged to academy in France, and he died around the time that Kardec was releasing Spiritism.
Yeah, if Einstein, when he was alive, come back towards the whatever theory of relativity or anything else while he is alive, it would be respected, would be well taken. But if Einstein now, as this kind of spirit come and bring us another theory, another physical thought, who will you take it? Who will you say, oh, it comes from Einstein, we have to pay attention to it?
Okay. Numbers. Continue.
Yes, please.
Okay. 79. When one creates a vacuum in a bell glass by using a vacuum pump, the bell glass sticks to the base and it is impossible to unstick the glass because of the air pressure holding it down. If air is put back into it, the bell glass is easy to unstick because the air pressure has been restored to equilibrium. And if it is left to itself, it will remain on the plate due to the law of gravity. However, if the air pressure inside the bell glass becomes greater than the air on the outside, the glass will rise in spite of gravity. If a rapid and forceful current of air is employed, the glass will remain suspended in the air without any visible means of support, like what happens when those dolls that spin upon the sprays of a water fountain. So, why wouldn't the universal fluid, the basic element of all matter, accumulated around a table, not have the ability to increase or decrease the table's specific relative weight, just like the air does with the bell glass or hydrogen does with balloons, without derogating from the law of gravity? Do you know about all the properties and the full power of this fluid? No. Well then, do not deny a fact simply because you cannot explain it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kardec ended item 79 saying that we will try to respond to them, to those who have those questions, from their very own point of view. That is, we will momentarily set aside the artificial life explanation. So Kardec takes gravity, law of gravity, and says, here is an example of how we can change around how this thing of gravity functions. And I give a very simple example. You take a glass, use a bell-shaped glass, but imagine that you take a glass, empty, put on a flat surface, okay? And then you create vacuum inside of that vessel, that glass base, right? Remove all the air of it to create vacuum, and maintain like that. You not be able to lift that. Let's say that the glass weighs a quarter of a kilogram, 250 grams, right? Light. All right. If you remove all the air, creates a vacuum inside of the glass, you will not be able to lift that glass from the table. It will be as if you weighed 10 tons. Why is that? Because between the glass, the container itself, and the table, there is air, right? And when you suck in all the air out of that vessel, you pull out all the air that is between the table and the glass, together. So they are so tight together that basically that air between the table and the vessel is trying to get into the vessel. It's trying to eliminate vacuum, and you cannot. You see that in many other situations that you cannot open the hot part that is full of seeding. You cannot have to wait until you cool off before you be able to open. In many situations, you cannot do it. And then the opposite way, if you create a situation in where the air inside of that vessel becomes lighter than the air outside, that vessel, 250 grams, will fluctuate in the air, right? That's how the hot air balloon works, right? You just create air, you just make the air inside of that balloon lighter than the air outside. Heat disperses the molecules, right? So the molecule is more far apart, so to say, than the molecule of the air outside of that balloon. So that balloon takes off, it fluctuates. So we do that with gravity. We make a 250 grams jar impossible for us to lift off the table, and we create a balloon, put 5, 6 people on it, and make it take off in the air. So we defy gravity. But in reality, you don't defy gravity, you walk around gravity or with gravity. We do that all the time. So Kardec brings a very simple example of using their own things. You want to talk about gravity? I'll show you how you can defy gravity. Not even talking about the spirit. So there are means that we can produce those effects. Not even talking about the artificial explanation, which the ectoplasm that you already talked about here. Okay, questions, comments? So 180 for those who
Okay.
who took 79 seriously, because you can defy. This is science, this is physics. You can do that in your own home. If you have an ability to create vacuum inside that thing, you can do it and you can test it. And if you can do that, you have to accept that as a fact. Now let's see, adding to that, going back to the spiritual causes on the 80.
Okay. 80. Let us learn to the explanation of how a table moves. If a spirit can lift a table by the means indicated, then it can lift anything else as well. An armchair, for example. And if it can lift an armchair, it can also lift it with a person sitting in it if it uses enough force. Thus, we have provided an explanation for the phenomenon that has been produced 100 times by Mr. Holmes himself and by others too. He repeated it on a recent trip to London, and in order to prove to his audience that they were not victims of an optical illusion, he made a mark on the ceiling with a pencil and also allowed them to pass beneath the chair. Everyone knows that Mr. Holmes is a powerful physical effects medium. In this instant, he was both the efficient cause and the levitated object itself. Okay.
Okay. So Douglas Holmes was a very famous medium of physical effect that perform a lot of levitations. And I think he's the one who used to go flying out of one window and just come back to another window. He gave a lot of things. Tremendous show-off guy. At one point, he got too full of himself and was caught in some fraudulent stuff. But besides that, he was a true medium of physical effect, and was able to make things levitate and make himself levitate make a chair with him sitting on it to levitate. And all the Kardec is doing here at this point is say that the weight of the object, organic or inorganic in this case, being acted upon in the spirit, in the spiritual world, is not a problem at all for them to have to make it levitate, because there is no brute force being used. It's not that, if I have to lift something that is 200 pounds, forget it, I cannot do it. But as a spirit, in the spiritual world, if I'm able to manipulate ectoplasm and I go to that 200 pounds material with ectoplasm, I don't need to use brute force. I just have to use my will and levitate that 200 pound, things that I cannot do while incarnate. Because there is no brute force. And that's why spirits are able to perform things that seems to be very hard for us incarnate to perform, because it's not brute force that's being used. It's the will of the spirits by the mind, basically. The mind controlling the ectoplasm that is caught in that thing. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Douglas Home is a previous incarnation of Divaldo. And he told us that.
I think our time is up. I want to finish it with 81, if you allow me. Just tell me what they're talking about here. And that's basically what I already covered on 80. Okay, increase and decrease of weight of objects. Okay. First of all, what is a weight? In physics, weight is the force acted upon an object by gravity. Okay, that's the definition of weight, which is different of mass, right? Mass is the amount of matter in an object. And mass is constant, what weight is not, right? So if you take a plastic bag and fill it up with sugar, okay? The amount of sugar inside that plastic bag is the mass of that plastic bag. Okay, and the unit they use is kilogram. So let's say that is 3 kilograms. So the mass of the plastic bag is 3 kilograms. If you take the plastic bag, put on a scale over here, you will weigh 3 kilograms. If you take it to the moon, the mass will be the same. It will still be 3 kilograms. But the weight you're not going to be 3 kilograms anymore, because the force upon gravity on the moon, the source of moon, is much different than here. I don't know what it's going to be. The weight's going to be, but it's not going to be the same. So weight varies. Okay, mass does not vary. Okay, if you get 1 kilogram of lead, it'll be a sizable container that is 1 kilogram, or not much. For you to get 1 kilogram of cotton, it's going to be a much bigger object, because the weight, the force of gravity on the cotton is much lesser than in lead, because the density of the two things, right? So that's simple physics, because we know that. Okay. And all the 81 here is Kardec answering tremendous amount of questions that he received regarding exactly that. How can spirits manipulate objects and as if they had no weight? And as the very last example that he uses, let's say the name of the lady. Let's say the name. Okay, bring this a young lady and delicate lady who, by using only 2 fingers and as easily as she would a feather, can lift a strong and healthy man along with the chair upon which he is sitting. The very last paragraph, if we go there. The very last paragraph. Yeah, so it involves a young and delicate lady who, by use only 2 fingers and as easily as you would a feather, can lift a strong and healthy man along with the chair upon which he is sitting. The intermittent expression of the faculty in this type of phenomenon proves that the cause is foreign to the person who possesses it. Meaning that young lady could never lift that man in his chair, but she's not really doing that to use brute force. She's manipulating ectoplasm and is making that ectoplasm obey her desire, her will. So with her thought, she's able to lift that chair with a man sitting on it. So weight is in no way a problem for physical phenomena to happen. That's all that Kardec's saying on this number 81. I don't think we need to go back to it. And next week we start spontaneous physical manifestations. It'll be more interesting. Any questions? Okay, can we go prayers?
Okay, I'll say the prayer.
Please.
To our spiritual benefactors, our teachers and our mentors, with our hearts full of gratitude, again, we thank you. We thank you for the participation and guidance as we continue through our classes, learning, and most important, understanding and putting into practice. We thank you, dear Lord. We ask that we continue throughout the week with our hearts of prayers for all that are needed outside our homes, hospitals, and hospices. We pray, dear Father, for peace and serenity and guidance, and allow us to continue to return again next week and to continue our prayers, helping all that we can with goodness, faith, and serenity. We thank you, dear Lord. And with that in mind, we ask permission to close our meeting tonight. So be it.